In this video, I'm going to show you how to create and combine field parameters with dynamic max value conditional formatting and detail labels, so you can create beautiful, user-friendly Power BI reports that deliver seamless and intuitive user experiences. Let's jump in. Just a quick note, my tutorials are created with object interaction off, and I also have new card visual on. So if you want to follow along step by step, please adjust these settings in your Power BI reports if they're different. So what are field parameters? Power BI desktop field parameters allow you to change measures and/or dimensions dynamically, all within the same visuals with just a simple click within a slicer. Once parameters have been created, you place them in visuals as well as slicers so you can toggle between the parameters within the visual. So what are the benefits of using field parameters? They allow you to keep your canvases clean and clutter-free, as you can use one visual that can be dynamically filtered to show multiple different insights and/or dimensions. They're quick and easy to set up. They're also typically easier to maintain versus complex layer grouping and bookmarks. Just like bookmarks, field parameters allow you to create dynamic interactivity within your Power BI reports. Your users get a more engaging and intuitive experience since they can control what they want to see within a visual or visuals. They also integrate nicely with DAX. For example, you can create dynamic conditional formatting based on the parameter that the user has selected. And I'm going to show you how to do that in Power BI in a little bit. All right, so let's dive right in here and create some field parameters. The first parameter I'm going to create is going to be related to the product dimensions. So we're going to go to Modeling, New Parameter, Fields. I'm going to name this parameter _product par. Now you can name yours whatever makes the most sense, but I'm going to go with this along with adding that underscore at the beginning, so all of my parameter tables will be grouped together in the data pane. Now I need to decide which dimension fields I want my users to be able to toggle between within the visual. So we're going to open up the product table, and I'm going to go with category, and we'll go with subcategory. Now note that I chose category first and then the subcategory second. You want to choose your dimensions by level of hierarchy if a hierarchy exists. I'm going to uncheck Add Slicer to this page and click Create. Now if we go to the table view, we can see what this parameter calculated table looks like. We can see we have the name of the field right here, which you can change here if you want, by the way. Next, we have the name of the location of that field. And then lastly, we have the order ID. So this is representing the sort order for these parameter fields. A 0 would be first, and the 1 would be second. And you can adjust those orders as well right here in the code. Now that we've created our dimension parameter, let's go ahead and create an insight parameter. I'm going to go to Modeling, New Parameter, Fields. For this one, I'm going to name it Insights par. And instead of adding dimensions, I'm actually going to add the measures I want to evaluate those dimensions against. So first, we'll click on Units Sold, which is simply the sum of the order quantity. Next, we'll add Gross Sales, which is the sum of the total sales. Next, we'll add Net Profit, which is the gross sales minus the cost of goods. And then lastly, we'll add Cost of Goods, which is our total product costs minus refunds. I'm going to uncheck Add Slicer to this page and then click Create. So as you can see here right at the top, we have our new parameter table housing our measure-related parameters. And we can also see those parameters here on the data view right here near the top because I added those underscores. So now that we've created our parameters, let's create a visual to place those parameters in. I'm going to open up Visualizations, and we'll go with the stacked bar chart. I'm going to drag it right over here, and I'm going to manually adjust the width and the height to be the same size as the white portion of this right side visual background box. Now let's go ahead and open up our insight parameter. We're going to drag the insight parameter right here into the x-axis. Then we'll open up our product parameter and drag that into our y-axis. Now I know this looks a little messy at the moment, but don't worry, we are going to fix that. Next, let's add a tile slicer. So we're going to click out, click tile slicer, and we'll drag it right over here for now. Let's go back to our product parameter and put this product parameter into the slicer field. So now that we have our product parameter in a slicer, let's go ahead and create a secondary tile slicer, drag it below that, open up our insight parameter, and drag the insight parameter into the fields. So now we have both parameters in these slicers. So look what happens. Let's say we want to select category and then units sold. Notice how the visual is only now showing units sold for the category. I can click gross sales, net profit, cost of goods, and the measure is dynamically changing based on my selection in the slicer. I can also change my dimension. We can switch to subcategory, now change it to whatever measure we'd like to analyze subcategory for. So as you can see, this is a pretty cool feature, and it's also very simple to implement. But we're not going to stop right there, because this channel is called Next Level Power BI Reports. So now it's time to design. Let's first work on our bar chart. I'm going to unselect my selections from the two slicers. Then I'm going to select the bar chart, go to Format Your Visual, General. We're going to open up Properties, and then Padding. I'm going to change the top padding to 15. We'll leave 5 pixels for the rest of the padding. Now let's close Properties, open up Title. We're not going to adjust the text because this will actually change dynamically based on the slicer selection. All we're going to do here is adjust the font to Sago UI semi-bold. We're going to change the size to 12, and we're going to make sure the text is the hex code of 333333. We also want to center align it. Let's open up Effects, turn the background off. Next, we'll go into the visual formatting and open up the Y-axis. We're going to leave the font as Sago UI, but we're going to change the size to 10. For the color, we're going to go with that hex code of 333333. We're going to turn title off, and for the maximum width, we're going to increase it to 50%. Let's close the Y-axis and open up the X-axis. We're going to turn values off, title off, and legend off. Now we're going to open up the bars. Now don't worry about the color just yet. We're going to adjust that later on. What you want to do though is open up a layout. We're going to change the space between the categories to 30%. Now the next thing we want to do is come over here to our slicers and select one of these insights. So I'm just going to select units sold. Now I'm going to go back into my bar chart by selecting it. I'm going to scroll down, then I'm going to open data labels, and we're going to set the position to outside end. We're going to open up value. We're going to change the font to Sago UI bold. We're going to make the font size 10, and we'll change the color to our hex code of 333333. We're going to change display units to none. Let's turn background on, open it up, change the color to white, and lower the transparency to 0. Now let's see how this looks by selecting the different measures within our insight parameter slicer. All right, so that looks good. All right, so now it's time to design our parameter tile slicers. I'm going to start with the product one right here. Let's click on it, go to General, Properties. We're going to zero out the padding on the top and the bottom, but for the left and the right, 10 pixels. Then we're going to turn title off. We're going to scroll down, open up Effects, turn the background off. We're also going to turn header icons off. Now let's scroll up to the visual formatting settings and open up slicer settings. Now in order for the visual to not look like this, we actually have to force selection. So let's click on that product slicer again and enable force selection. Make sure single select is on. And then we'll open up Layout. We're going to change this to a single row. We'll leave the style as cards. We'll change the space between buttons to 5. Now let's open up Callout Values. We're going to leave the font as Sago UI, but we're going to change the size to 9. Then I'm going to change the color to white and center align it. I'm going to keep scrolling down and open up buttons. We're going to turn the fill off and the border off. For the padding, we're going to select Custom. We're going to zero out the top padding and zero out the bottom padding. And then for the left and the right, 10 pixels. Now let's turn Selection icon on and expand it. We're going to change the color to white. Make sure your state says default when you do that. Then open up Layout. We're going to change the size to 13 pixels and the vertical alignment as center. Now let's take that tile slicer, place it right over here in this darker portion of the right side background box. Now our goal here is to make sure this is perfectly centered as well as fits perfectly within that top portion of this box. So let's quickly manually adjust the height and then zoom in to 150%. I'm going to scroll over and first adjust the bottom height. Then I'll adjust the top height. I'll click on it, manually move it up. We're going to adjust the right side width, and then we'll adjust the left side width. I'm going to click out and take a look. Now I can see that looks a little off to me, so I'm going to go double check my padding. I'm going to select it, go to Format Your Visual, General, Properties, Padding. This top padding, I actually want that to be 0. Now when I click out, I can see we're centered. So now I'm going to zoom out to 100%. All right, so that looks pretty good, but I'm going to make one more small adjustment here because I don't like the spacing. So I'm going to select it, go to Selection icon, Layout, and we're going to change the spacing to 0. So I think that looks better, so we'll leave it at that. Okay, so this looks good, but now we want to enhance this just a little more by making the selection have a higher contrast versus the unselected. So while we have this slicer selected, let's go to Visual Formats and Callout Values. Under the default state, let's increase the transparency to 20%. Now let's switch the state to Hover. We'll change the font to Sago UI Semi-Bold, lower the transparency to 0%. Next, we'll change the state to Selected, lower the transparency to 0%. We'll underline it, and we'll change the font to Sago UI Bold. All right, so I think that looks good, so we'll go with that. All right, so next we need to format our Insight tile slicer. And to give us a head start, we're simply going to select our product slicer, go to Format Painter here at the top left, click it, and then we're going to left click in the Insight parameter slicer. Let's drag this right up here so we can see it. Now, while we have that selected, we're going to go to Format Your Visual, General, Properties, and then Padding. Now for this one, we actually are going to zero out the padding on all 4 sides. Let's go to Visual Formatting and open up Layout. We're going to change the arrangement to a single column. Next, we're going to open up Callout Values. We're going to turn Values off. We'll keep scrolling down, open up Selection icon. We'll make sure we're on the default state, and we're going to change the color to our brand color here, which is the hex code of 30A298. We're going to open up Layout. We're going to increase the size to 17. For the spacing, we're going to go with 15 pixels. Let's scroll down and open up Buttons. We're going to change the left and the right side to 5 pixels. Now let's take that tile slicer and drag it over here to the left side of our report, and then go over to General, Properties, Size. We're going to make the width 30 pixels. Then we're going to manually adjust the height to touch that horizontal line here right at the top. And then we'll take the bottom, adjust the bottom height, touch that bottom horizontal line that we have at the bottom. Let's zoom in a little bit, click on our tile slicer, and manually adjust the slicer to center align it within this vertical white space. Once we have that, we can zoom back to 100%. Take a look. All right, so that looks good. Now, as we can see here, we do not have any text to let the user know what these selections do. So the first step here is to add icons and place them right near these selections. So we're going to go to Insert, Button, Blank Button. Drag it right over here. Go into General, Properties. We're going to make the height 35 and the width 60. I'm going to take that button and drag it right below that first selection pane. The goal would be to touch the bottom of the selection icon without going over it. Let's actually go to Button, Style, and turn Border off so we can get a clearer look to see if we're touching that top part. And it looks like we can actually make the width just a little bigger. All right, so the next thing we need to do is go into Button Format, Style. We're going to make sure Icon is on, and then select Custom. Once you select Custom, you're going to click Browse. Now you can add a PNG icon if you'd like. I actually have some SVG icons that I like to use. So in this case, I'm going to add my units sold black icon. Click Open. I'm going to center align it, and I'm going to remove the padding on all four sides. Now before I zoom out, I want to make sure that my icon is dead center with the selection icon above. Once it looks good, I'm going to zoom back out to 100%, and then take a look. Now the next step would be to just simply take this button and copy it 3 times. So Control-C, Control-V, Control-V, Control-V. We're going to take the bottom one. We're going to place it directly under the bottom selector. We'll take these other 2, put them over here. We'll select all 4. We're going to go to Format, Align Left, and then we'll go back into Format and Align Distribute Vertically. Click out. Next, we just need to swap these icons out with the icons that represent the metric. So this one's units sold. We know it's units sold because we can actually see the title in our visual here to the right-hand side. And if I click on the other one, we can see that changes to gross sales. So I'm going to switch those out right now. Now, once you finish that, it's really important that you open up your selection pane and adjust your layer order. So you can see here that I've already completed my layer grouping. So we have my header, and then we have this group called Side Nav Par. You can see that is storing the icons in the parameter tile slicer. Now, if I open this up, notice how the insight parameter is on top of the buttons. Now, that's really important because we want the user to be able to click on these selections. All right, so we're looking really good here. But now let's take this a step further. What if we wanted these bars here to dynamically change color based on the selections to highlight the highest value in the view? And maybe we want the color to change depending on the insight measure we have selected as well. So we can achieve this easily with DAX. I'm going to select this bar chart, open up Data, and then Visualizations. I'm going to go to Format Your Visual, open up Bars, and then for color, I'm going to click FX. I'm going to change it to Field Value, and then under Measures, I'm going to select a measure that I created called Max Product Insight Color, and then click OK. So we can see now that this measure is highlighting the highest value of the insight that we're showing, and it's actually changing the color based off of the insight that we're choosing. So let me show you quickly how this measure is working. Now we're going to look at this measure, but just for units sold only, so you can understand how it works. First, we capture the parameter order ID related to the parameters that the user has selected. Next, we switch out these parameter IDs that the user has selected with the max units sold for the category and subcategory fields. The ID of 0 represents our category parameter, and the category of 1 represents our subcategory parameter. The all function here is going to ignore all and any filters that may be applied to the category and subcategory fields. Then after that, the all selected function will respect the user's filter or slicer selections within the report by dynamically capturing the max units sold within the view. Again, all based on the user's selections. And then lastly, we choose a color to attach to the max units sold within the view. So this is just for units sold, like I said. But all we need to do now is add the same logic within this measure for the other 3 insights. So we can see here all we did is copied and pasted the max units variable that existed within this measure. We then adjusted the variable names, and then we swapped out the units sold measure inside with the respected measures that should be there. And then lastly, we decided which colors to apply to the max values in view when each parameter insight is selected. So the next thing we're going to do here is click on this bar chart, open up visualizations, format your visual, bars. We're going to scroll down and open up data labels, and then we're going to turn on detail and open it up. We're going to click add data, and I'm going to add a measure called month-over-month percentage insight text. We'll go with a 10 font size, and we're not going to worry about the color just yet. So this measure is going to dynamically change the month-over-month percentage depending on the insight that we have selected. Let me show you how it's working. So what this measure does is first capture the insight parameter field that the user has selected. It then switches that parameter ID with the month-over-month percentage measure associated with that insight. For example, the parameter ID of 0 we know is for units sold. Therefore, we want to show our month-over-month percentage for units sold here. The ID of 1 is for gross sales, so therefore we want to bring in the gross sales month-over-month percentage. Next, we have net profit. And then lastly, we have cost of goods. And note that these are the text versions of our month-over-month percentage measures, because we actually want to show the up or down arrow in the visual that we're bringing this into, in our case, our bar chart. This measure is simply a text version of the percentage measure to the right-hand side. Now, if you want a complete breakdown of this month-over-month percentage measure to the right, feel free to check out my video, Master Dynamic Month-over-Month and Year-over-Year Percentage Variance DAX Measures in Power BI. You can find it in the videos within this channel. All right, so we're starting to look really good here. But what if we want to take this a step further and have these month-over-month percentages change color based off of if it's a positive or a negative percentage? What I'm going to do is select that bar chart again, open up visualizations, format your visual, data labels, detail, and then I'm going to click the FX right here. For rules, I'm going to select field value, and then for measures, I'm going to select a measure I created called month-over-month insight percentage color. So now we can see we've changed the color of these percentages based off of if it's a positive or a negative percentage. Let me show you how I did that. All right, so first we need to capture the parameter order ID. Next, we're saying if the selection is 0, 1, or 2, which means units sold, gross sales, or net profit are selected within the insight parameter, then the month-over-month percentage for that parameter insight selected needs to be greater than or equal to 0. And if that's true, then return this hex code, which is a shade of green. If less than 0, then return this red color. Now, if we're looking at cost of goods, we actually want to flip it. In a positive percentage, we're going to make the color red, and in a negative percentage, we're going to make the color green. And as you can see here, we're using the same measure shown here below that we did earlier. The only difference is we're using the non-text versions of these month-over-month percentage measures. And that allows us to be able to evaluate the actual value to see if it's greater than or less than 0 in order to attach a color. Now, what if we wanted to add another parameter for a different dimension? So for example, maybe we wanted to include territory, but make it so it's its own separate parameter. What we can do is create the parameter. And you can see here, I already did it. Now that we have that new parameter, all we need to do is select this group. I'm going to copy, paste it. I'm going to drag it over here. I'm going to make sure it's perfectly aligned. Now let's select that new bar chart, open up data, and we're going to switch out the product parameter with our new territory parameter. Then we're going to click onto the slicer and switch out the product parameter with the territory parameter. Next, we need to go into the field where it says territory parameter and select show selected field. Now we need to click on the bar chart, go to format your visual, bars. We're going to click FX, and we're going to change the max product insight color to our new measure that we made, max territory insight color. So it's the exact same measure that we made for product. The only difference is we switched out the product dimensions and those IDs with the territory dimensions and their IDs. All right, let's close this up and test it out. All right, everything is looking good, as we can see here. We're just going to add a few more finishing touches. So you can see here I added a card at the top left corner. Now the card itself has our insights parameter inside of it. So that will change based off of the selection. We can also see that we have a month-over-month percentage here, which is the same measure that we put inside our bar charts. So if I click on this card, you can see it's called month-over-month percentage insight text. And you can also see the shape behind it is going to change to red or green based off of the percentage that's in there. So that would be the same measure we used in our bar chart as well for the details. You can see it's the month-over-month insight percentage color. And the finishing touches here will be this month-over-month period label, and then these two informational text boxes, just letting the user know that we're looking at totals here as well as month-over-month percentage within these bar charts. So I really hope you found value in this in-depth tutorial on how to create field parameters and then how to apply dynamic conditional formatting to those visuals based off of the parameters selected. Now, if you found these tips helpful, feel free to subscribe, click the notification button. That way you'll be notified when I come out with additional videos related to Power BI UX/UI design. If you have any requests for certain quick tip videos, feel free to leave them in the comments. And then lastly, if you're looking for a course on advanced Power BI UX/UI design, feel free to check out the description where I have a link to my new course, 14 Days to Mastering Power BI UX/UI Design.